Today I'm speaking with Sasha Zouev. Sasha, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm very
It's great.
excited to
Yeah,
have
it's
this
great to
chat.
meet you. And Sasha you're one of the few people that I have met that is actually an author. We're going to talk about this book in a little bit, but uh, great title name, Tim and the Giant Teapot. I love that name, of course.
It took me a while to realize that is your namesake, but yes,
Works out
thank you.
perfectly. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But Sasha grew up in Belgium and now lives in London. He is a PhD philosopher as well as a researcher at the University of Leeds. He's also an online tutor and a consultant. And of course, he's also a children's book author. His interests, these are some interesting interests. I'd like to hear about some of these as we go through your story. But his interests include the philosophy of mind, such as competing theories of consciousness, as well as the philosophy of science, such as structural realism. And I will admit, I have no idea what that refers to. So feel free to fill us in there. He has published books on the simulation argument as well as the doomsday argument. His new children's book, again, Tim and the Giant Teapot, is one of the first children's picture books to deal with topics concerning critical thinking, humanism, and atheism. It's a way to introduce children to basic epistemology. He's also the vice president of Atheism UK. So we got a lot to talk about. But Sasha, if you could, before we get into all that, tell us about yourself and some fun things.
One of the fun things, I'm trying to do a triathlon this summer, which is something I never thought I would do, considering I hate cycling and I hate running. But I signed up for an Ironman, whatever it's called. Yeah, and I'm training for that. So that is fun in a way.
Is that in England?
It's going to be in Belgium by the
Okay,
seaside. So
nice.
you have to run, you have to bike, you have to swim nearly 2 kilometers, bike 90 kilometers, and then run 20 kilometers, half a marathon.
Wow.
And yeah, I'm not scared about the swimming part, but the other stuff. But that's something fun that's coming up. I don't know if you're an avid runner or anything, but
I'm an avid walker, but I'm not a runner. But that's awesome. I love it. I love it.
yeah.
Do you miss some of the cuisine in Belgium?
Or when I'm in London, actually, there is one thing I do miss, but I don't know, it might sound strange to your American audiences. So we have this dish, it's called préparé. Well, it's like steak tartare. You know what steak tartare? Yeah. So it's
I
basically
think so.
raw meat, minced meat. But here they put it like on sandwiches for lunch, and kids eat it every day for lunch. Basically, just like raw beef smeared on a sandwich, and nobody gets sick. Well, knock on
Wow.
wood. But yeah.
That doesn't
Yeah,
sound very appealing to
that
me,
is
but
one thing I miss amongst well, chocolate and waffles. I'm trying to lower my carbohydrate intake, especially processed sugars. But yeah, the raw meats is one thing I do miss.
yeah, I was
Yeah.
I was in Paris like 25 years ago, and I loved that. I got like one of those big crepes where they put the chocolate on it right in
Yeah,
front of the
yeah,
Eiffel
yeah.
Tower, and that was so good. So I'm sure Belgium has the same or better.
Yeah, yeah, our waffles are supposed to be the things that we, and obviously our beers. I don't
Yeah,
know if you're a beer drinker, but yeah.
very nice, very nice. Well, we're so glad you're here. We look forward to hearing more about all these arguments and so forth. But before we get into again some of the meat of this, could you just kind of take us back to your childhood? Tell us about the family you grew up in, and how did you get exposed to Christianity?
Sure. So I was born in what is known now as the Soviet Union. I was born in 1989, so just a year before it officially collapsed. But in my passport, it does say USSR. I'm from a family. I have an older brother. My parents are, if you ask them, they would say they're Russian Orthodox, which just kind of means like Christians. But they never pushed the religion onto us. In fact, they say they forgot to baptize us. Although at that point, because like earlier on in the Soviet Union, like religion was kind of a no-no. So you had to like my mom, she was baptized, but my grandma, her mom, had to do it in secret. Like she had to take her to the church in secret.
Hmm.
And my mom's dad was a pilot for the Soviet Union. So like it would look really bad if he was under the Soviet regime for his granddaughter to, but it's stupid. But basically, yeah, religion was kind of like that. Anyway, so they didn't baptize me. Um, they have no regrets about it either. But I do say to my brother that because me and him are the only ones in the family who weren't baptized, we're also the most like militant atheists in the family. Like everyone else was baptized. But
Hmm.
anyways, whatever. At the end of the day, it's like a sprinkling of the water.
Can I ask in that? Do you know in that version of Christianity, is that like a damning lack of action? Like, is a child going to go to hell if they're not baptized in their interpretation?
Um, I don't know, actually. That's a good question. I know they have some weird other sub rules. For example, my cousin, she has a child, but with the person she has a child, because they are not married, they're not allowed to baptize their child, even though both of them are quite religious. But because there's no sanctity of marriage, and I don't know why they haven't got, I mean, it's up to them if they want to or not. And they feel really bad. And now my other cousin has started wearing like a cross because he
Okay.
is baptized. And now that other one feels bad. Why does he get to wear a cross? I want to wear a cross. But like, he's like 5 and 6 years old. Like they don't know why they want to wear a cross. They just see other kids wearing a cross. But anyways, for me, yeah, my parents are, if you ask them, they're religious. But the relationship we have with regards to religion is one of the most healthiest that I can think of. Like we joke about like when my favorite football team loses, my dad will say to me like, "Oh, it's because you didn't pray," or like I don't know, like when something bad happens to him, I'll say, "Oh, it's because you didn't pray hard enough." So it's a very healthy, and like they know that I am very active in the atheism community, that I've been trying to promote atheism, and they're so supportive of me promoting atheism despite the fact that they are religious. And I don't give like I would never want them to give up their personal faith if all they do is like, light a candle or have these little icons. If it makes them feel better, and if it's not doing harm to anyone else, then why not? Like, our family is an example of you can have two people who are religious and two people who are quite, militant atheists, and they get along. And it's not an area of conflict. In fact, it's an area of humor. Like every day we just joke about it. Like you're going to hell, or you're like now I'm studying the simulation argument, which is like the topic of my PhD. My dad is basically like, well, aren't you basically saying that God exists, except he's a coder in the matrix? So like, aren't you actually religious? And then we joke about that. But no, it's
That's
fine. And I
interesting.
feel like as the time goes on, and they learn more and more about like, I'll send them speeches that Richard Dawkins did for Atheism UK, and they'll listen to bits and pieces of it. And I think like I don't want to convert them. That's not my goal. I mean, they seem perfectly content and happy with whatever this concept of religion they have. But I feel like we're kind of moving towards a bigger mutual understanding. Yeah.
Hmm. Now, in
Yeah.
terms of just the actual religious background, do you remember going to church and do you remember some of the messages you received there?
I was never well. I was never like we never went to Sunday church. When my granddad got sick and passed away 10 years ago, I do remember things like going with my dad just to the church here in Antwerp, and like he would light a candle, and I would ask, I was younger then, I was like 15 years ago, I would ask, like, why are we doing this? And he's like, well, this is for grandpa's health. And at the time, like, I was already skeptical minded, but I didn't want to like be like, hey, you do know that this is just a candle and grandpa's not going to get any better. So I kind of just I also lit one just in solidarity. But no, I was never taken to church, never forced to pray, never forced. In fact, I would say I have read the Bible and the Quran and the Torah more than my parents have. Like I make an effort to read
Hmm.
Bible at least once a year, more like twice a year. Old Testament, New Testament, the Quran. I try to read in as many different translations as I can because I want to be very on top of like I if I get into debate with a person who's religious, I want to know more than they know about their own religion. So I'm very, very well. I wouldn't say I'm very well versed, but I would say I know more about the Bible than, let's say, my average Christian friend. Certainly, I know more about the Quran than my average Muslim friend, which to me is like really weird. Like, why would an atheist know more? And I'm like, no, no, that's because the reason I'm an atheist is because I've seen what's inside the Quran. It's because I've seen what the Old Testament says. That's why I'm an atheist.
Yeah,
So yeah,
exactly. Well,
yeah.
when you were a kid, were you presented with messages of heaven and hell and the idea of Jesus as your savior?
No, luckily I was not, certainly not from my parents. I did go to a school which had a high number of Muslim students, but they were all massively hypocritical. But they did say to me things like, no, I asked them, I'm like, listen, your book says that because you're Muslim and I'm a kafir, I'm gonna burn in hell. And these were my best friends, and they're like, yeah, you have to, convert at some point. You can be on your deathbed. But I'm like, but if I don't and I die, you're one of my best friends. you're gonna see yourself go on the the escalator or whatever the fuck to heaven, and I'm gonna be burning in hell. He's like, yeah, but Sasha, you have a choice to. So it didn't come from any family or society pressures, but in school I was exposed to this idea of you are a sinner, you will go to hell, just through mostly Muslim friends. But yeah,
Hmm. Did you
the,
ever
the,
get tempted to kind of pray that prayer at all, to have a relationship with God through the Savior figure?
it's gonna sound well. I'm being honest, but the only time I've been tempted to pray is when it would benefit me. For example, if I had I had super important exams at the end of my 12th grade. I was supposed I applied to get into Oxford, and it all depended on these one exams. And I remember it's such a shitty thing, but then again, no harm, no foul. I put on the cross, I had a cross lying somewhere in the cupboard, and I just sat there and I was like, Allah, like that Simpson scene, like Allah, Jesus, Buddha, whichever one of you is there, like please get me the grades. And I did get the grades, but I never credited any of the three for the grades. But
Hmm.
yeah, so whenever I did feel compelled to pray or to believe that there was a higher power that I could reach out to, it would always be like in a narcissistic, for my own benefit thing, not because of anything else. And then,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that's a bad thing or not, but
No, it
at
makes
least I'm
sense.
honest about it now.
Like a amulet or a little rabbit's foot kind of thing. Good luck
Yeah,
charm.
it's like a superstition. Yeah.
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 Now, in terms of your family, I'd love to hear more about that. When you were growing up, for most people, if they really believe that they're sinners and that there's a sin problem that has to be dealt with, or else, and that there is a way to have that dealt with through Jesus or whatever other savior figure is in another religion, they usually pass it on to their kids. Why do you think your parents were so different and letting you have the freedom to kind of pick your own path?
That's a really good question. And honestly, I will say I'm very lucky because amongst my other Russian friends, Um, it's not that they were like abused or brainwashed to the extent that I see happening in America, where it's like if you don't go to church, like you're basically banished from the community. But they would pressure them more from a young age. Like I said, my cousins now are wearing crosses and almost not by choice. Why did my parents not do that? I don't know. I'd like to think it's because they have a more liberal worldview, kind of, you know? Like a child is born, like when me and my brother were born, besides like, okay, maybe, you kind of have to choose clothes for them to wear to school. But besides that, they let us kind of free reign, like find your own interest. Okay, like my dad really wanted us to play tennis because he felt like that's important for later on in business life. But besides that, like just do well in school. But any other interests that you have, any other beliefs that you have, you want to join this student society or this one, like they were very liberal in that sense. Kind of let the kid make his own mistakes, which I think if I ever do have children, I would also be the same. But the other thing is I still am not convinced how convinced they are in their own beliefs. So if they're just kind of like, yeah, we are, Christian, Russian Orthodox, so they're not really going to push it onto their kids, and there's no point. Like that's another. I was just talking to my dad about this yesterday, and he's like, Sasha, isn't it weird? And I think this is like a rephrasing of a Richard Dawkins quote, but Richard Dawkins basically said, don't you find it statistically weird that every single person who's a Christian, 99% of the time, their parents were Christian? So it's like a statistical, if you're born into a Christian family, oh, you're a Christian as well? How does that work? Well, the obvious thinking man will tell you it works because the Christian parents or the Christian community makes them. If you were born in Thailand or if you were born in New Delhi, would you still be Christian? No, you would probably be Hindu or you'd probably be Buddhist. So that alone is such a powerful argument for questioning your faith, that the place that you were born and the flavor of your parents' religion dictates your religion. Like, just try thinking about what your life would be like if you weren't born in, southern Arkansas, whatever, or the reddest of states. If you were born in Saudi Arabia, you would believe that Allah is the word of God and not Jesus. Like
Yeah,
that, yeah. So
it's
the
true.
counterpoint to that might be like, oh, Sasha, but you're an atheist, like maybe It's because of what? And then I can say, well, no, because my parents actually are religious, but I'm an atheist not through any of that. And also, atheism is not a religion. It's it's there's many definitions, but the best one that I like is it's basically we don't see enough evidence for there to be a God. It's not. I think I classify more as an agnostic in this sense. Richard Dawkins has a whole scale of atheism, but I would say that atheism, first of all, it's the default. But like, there's no baby that's born a Christian baby or a Muslim baby. With Judaism, it's slightly more complex because of the racial aspect of it. But when when you emerge from the uterus, you are not a Christian baby and you are not a Muslim baby. Later on in life, in your early 4, 5, 6 years, your family tells you you are a Muslim child, you are a Christian child, but you're actually not. There's nothing inherently about you once you are born that makes you Muslim or Christian, besides the fact that your parents are. But that's just a character trait that they've taken on. At the end of the day, you are a baby, no different than I was a baby when I was born. And then later on, you make your own opinions if you are free from the brainwashing that religious cults, all religions do.
Yeah.
Would you
And
agree with
also,
that? Yeah.
as you say, just the other part of that too is not just the religion of your family, but also the culture, because the reality is that every generation reinterprets the religion that they're based on the cultural norms. And so there were things 200 years ago that if you grew up in a Christian family, you looked a certain way, and 200 years earlier, it would have been different, and so forth. And especially if you look back, at the first couple centuries after Christ of AD, when it went from BC to AD, the first couple hundred years, it would have been radically different when you're talking about growing up mostly in a Jewish syncretized Greco-Roman mystery cult era. Those early Christians, their Christianity would have come out so differently. So it isn't just like I grew up as a Christian in a Christian home. I grew up in a Christian home with a specific language which affects your culture, with the general culture overall, with the dynamics of politics and the way that secularism has brought changes. There's so many ways in which it's even more complicated, and it's amazing how when you look at how the Christians often cherry pick which verses they want to live by. There were things that a couple hundred years ago they were much more literal. Like if you're a Christian, you really live this way, and for other Christians it was very different. Like I remember when I was a kid watching Chariots of Fire, this beautiful movie about these runners. But it was a big deal where the guy was like, you don't run on the Sabbath, like meaning for them Sunday, but you don't run on the Sabbath. You don't play soccer or whatever on the Sabbath. It's not a game day. It's not. And today, of course, most Christians will be like, well, go to church on Sunday, but you can go play afterwards and have fun. It's a day of rest. If running or playing soccer is fun to you, then go have rest that way. It just means to them, it just means you don't go to your job. But to a lot of people 200 years ago, it meant don't do almost anything. Like it's just like it's a quiet day in every sense. And so it's fascinating to me how we kind of cherry pick.
Who would you say is more right? Those guys or those guys? I would say the ones 200 years ago, reading more literally, I would say they. And then, yeah. You see, you can't pick and choose things you like from the Bible. I know people do.
Yeah.
But it's even more prevalent in Islam, where the Quran is the literal book of God, and you have to follow it to a T. And if you don't, then you're basically saying you know better than Allah. Like it is the literal truth. And yes, there's different ways of interpreting certain parts. And Christianity has gone through a bit of a reformation. But at the end of the day, the Old Testament, I think even the Bible says, a man shall not lay with another man. So when people say to me like, oh, no, there's ways to have Christianity that is accepting of homosexuality. And I look at them and I go like, is there really? Like, I don't think there is. There are some priests out there who are saying like, I'm okay with the gays. But the book says clearly that you shouldn't be.
Right. Well, I think what's interesting to me about it is that it's pretty clear that all of them are exposing in different ways that they really don't believe. What I mean by that is that when you look at something like a premature death, someone dies in their childhood or teenage years or young adulthood, and if they're a Christian, then you would think to yourself as another Christian that that's awesome. God basically said, I want you to get to the good stuff in heaven. I want you to get to the best part of your experience, the best part of your existence. I want you to get there early. I'm going to give you your Christmas presents a week early. This is a celebration time. And yet, 9 times out of 10, to every Christian, that is an utter tragedy. It is so, so sad. And you're like, wait a second,
The last thing I
is
would
it
want someone
sad?
to say to me if I just lost my child prematurely.
Yeah. But I mean, well,
Yeah.
I mean, you would say that as in the humanness of you, like you selfishly want your own children to be with you. But if your theology and worldview says, if this life is nothing but truly pain, and the best thing they could do is to be in the presence of the glory of God, if that's truly like the best experience you could ever have, is to be in God's presence, experience his white hot holiness, and you're glorified in a context where you can see his holiness and not be consumed, and you just experience the warmth and the love and the beauty of his personhood. If that's the best part of experience that's ever going to happen, then getting there earlier is the best thing. And so anybody as a Christian that's professed faith in Christ that you know has a relationship with God and has peace with God, their death at any point should be nothing but a pure celebration. And yet
Yeah,
for
but
most humans, it's not.
that is a very dangerous mindset because it also means that, well, like, the opposite is the humanist outlook, which is we have one life and we have to make the most of it. This one life that we have, because they don't assume an afterlife because there's no evidence for an afterlife. If you believe in an afterlife, then it kind of gives you free reign to kind of be a shitty person or not take this life that well. You know, like, oh, paradise is coming once I'm dead. No, no, no. Like, you have this one life. Be a good person in this one life, which is why I also think that there are difference between the three major religions. For example, Islam does believe in an afterlife, Christianity does as well. But Judaism, I was surprised to learn not too long ago, they actually don't have a concept of a heaven. Like they have no concept of a paradise. For them, it's also basically you have your time on earth. And I think that is reflected in how Jews, Muslims, and Christians live when they're on this planet. If you're always promised this afterlife where, you know, it's paradise, so if you're dead, it's kind of, you know, either through martyrdom in Islam, whatever, that, you know, there's greater things afterwards. But no, if you're told this is the one life you have, make the most of it, then you will live your life totally different. And that's what I feel like, at least the Jewish community that I'm familiar with, that's what they do. They understand that this is life, and then life comes to an end. And yeah.
Yeah, I think the extreme afterlife stuff really does keep you from being able to grieve properly because you at least theologically are thinking, I mean, you should be thinking if you're really, truly enmeshed in the Christian theology, you're thinking to yourself, this isn't really a death. This is like, and that's why the New Testament says they're falling asleep, because it's like they're asleep and they will wake up soon. This is very temporary. So it kind of deprives you of the ability to grieve. But again, I think that there's a lot of people
But
that
it does bring comfort to people, I guess.
Yeah.
But do I want to take that away from them? I don't. Actually, I posted something, not a funny meme or something, but I said, I'm an atheist when it comes to everything except for the death of dogs and cats. They get to go to doggy and cat heaven. Because to me, it's just like if our cat passed away, she was 18 years old 2 years ago. But to me, it's a bit of a joke, but tongue in cheek. Like, yeah, she's in cat heaven because there is a cat heaven. I know there isn't, but I can understand if you just lost your man's best friend, you know, it's easier to think like, oh, for little Fido, he's up there, picking a bone with another dog.
Yeah. But again, I think
Right.
going back to what I was saying earlier, I think it actually is that they really don't believe this stuff. Like I think what we're talking about of that they need this comfort. It is comforting, but it is surface level because I don't think it's actually comforting them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be grieving so intensely and saying, "Oh, this is awful. So and so died at age 18 or 25. Like, why didn't they get to live their whole life?" It's like, so you're saying you're actually thinking this is not fair, and this is a great loss. And theologically, it's not a great loss. It's a great win. It's a wonderful win. They got to go to the biggest party ever a few years early. And you'll be there in the blink of an eye anyway, compared to eternity. You'll be there soon, so just let it go. It's a good thing. They don't see it the way they grieve and they grieve and they grieve, and it's unfair, and they talk about it for years. This is so wrong that they died so early. I think that they secretly keep on betraying that they don't really believe it, and even things like the homosexuality, where it's like,
But they'll say though, oh, they're better off But you're saying they're kind of lying to themselves because
Yeah,
of all the grieving that they do anyways,
yeah,
despite the fact, oh, well, this person is, yeah, I agree with
yeah.
you
It's
on that.
it's like if you're invited to a huge ball, where it's going to be dancing and dinner and cakes galore. You're going to just have a great party for the next 4 or 6 hours. Everyone's dressed to the nines, and they're calling some people in, and your friend right next to you gets called in, and they basically say, we're going to call these people in, but you're the rest of you, it's going to be a little bit. You're going to have to wait. You're not going to be sitting there thinking, this is so unfair. This is so wrong. I'm so glad my friend got in the ball, but I'll be there in the next half hour. I'll be joining you, and we'll be having a great time. That's kind of where it should be, but they betray that they don't really believe it. And we talk a lot about cherry picking, where they're cherry picking what they want to believe too in terms of God's holiness, where it's like the whole thing of like working on the Sabbath. Again, before that used to be a big deal. Don't do anything on Sunday. And now,
So is that in the New Testament as well as the Old Testament? There's no
well, they
working
would
on.
carry it over from the Old Testament Sabbath. They would say that this Sunday is the new Sabbath, but it's still a day of rest. Again, older Christians would have been much more literal, where they would have said, don't do anything. You go to church, you kind of come home and you sit quietly. It's a day of quietness and reflection. Today, they would say, if you want to go walk in the park and have a party, go. Like it's a day of celebration more. It's because society's changed. But that every generation is going to cherry pick which ones they want. The homosexuality you brought up is a good point, where they're saying, I do believe God, but I know he says to kill certain people for certain sins, but I'm not. I think, and the way they excuse it a lot is the grace thing. Like, that was the law, that was Moses. We're not under law anymore. We're under the grace era, so therefore it's kind of changed. But it's like, but Moses didn't give the law. He was just a conduit. If Jesus is God, then God gave the law. So it was Jesus before, and now it's still Jesus. There's
Sounds
no
like a lot of
difference.
mental gymnastics.
Yeah, it's just they're just trying to find some way to justify the fact that culture's changing, and they want to say God's okay with this. In reality, it's not. There's no God saying he's okay with it. They're just trying to kind of mix with the culture, and yet still say they're Christians. I think what I'm saying is, in summary, is I think that a lot of Christians keep on betraying that they don't really believe that this is more cultural than they'd ever give credence to. That it's a cultural event that they don't want to call a cultural event. They want to call it a true religion and a relationship with Christ. But they keep on giving these little hints, like, I'm saying it's a religion, it's a relationship, but secretly it's just culture. It's just culture. And, they betray themselves all over the place.
I would like to ask you, sorry, not off topic, it's still on topic, a very quick question. So, like, from my viewing of the media in America, some of these most, the GOP, the MAGAs, they call themselves true Christians. But yet you look at their actions.
Great example.
Having multiple affairs, cheating on your wife, cheating on your taxes, not giving food to the poor. It seems like they do everything that Jesus would have told them not to do, and yet they call themselves the true Christian, like sending immigrants, without due process. Like it's wild to me as an outside observer seeing what's happening in America, because I'm like, they're saying that they are Christians and they read the Bible. And maybe they have read the Bible, but if they did, they should read it again. I'm not defending the Bible. I'm not defending Jesus. But if Jesus was alive today and saw the shit that Donald Trump is doing, Jesus would condemn 99% of what Donald Trump is doing.
Yeah. Yeah. He'd go into Congress and flip tables.
How do you make sense of that? Like, it's
a similar related parallel is the pro-life stance. They say they're pro-life, but then everything they do is very much against it, between everything from
Donald
the
Trump has
gun
paid
laws
for
to
5+ abortions for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're pro-life on paper, but they're pro-death in reality. It's crazy. Well, I do want to make sure we get back to your story.
Yeah.
When you look at your life, what are some of the major things that have sort of been the high points or low points of your journey psychologically through this, like in terms of epistemology, but also just, existentialism? What has been your thought process as you thought, am I a nihilist? Is there a reason for this? What is my life going to be all about? How do I figure this out? What if I'm wrong? Pascal's wager. Are there any things, junctures in your life where you would say you kind of went through the dark night of the soul and just had to really wrestle with some hard questions that tore you apart until you came to a place of equilibrium?
It's a very good question. Like I said, I was never really fully bought into the whole Christianity thing or any organized religion. I did probably growing up as a teenager think, yeah, there's probably a God, but it never really played on my mind. Also, the question of death, it didn't bother me then. It doesn't bother me now. But when I was 17, 18, I got to see Christopher Hitchens speak at the Oxford Union, and he was talking about the dangers of Islam and how even if you're not religious, you need to be not atheism is not enough. You need to be an anti-theist because if you're not careful, those who are religious will come to your. I don't know if that's happening in America, but we see it in countries here in Europe. Um, he gave this very famous speech saying that the barbarians are already at the gates, and we've opened the gates for them. Um, and Islam is not a religion that is compatible with the rest. So then I became very militant atheist. I founded the Atheism Secular and Humanism Society at 3 different universities that I was at, and then I joined the Atheism UK. So I do think the need for atheist outreach is important, but also we get these requests. We also have a subsidiary which deals with people who are born into like Muslim households and are scared to leave. So it's called Freedom from Faith. And they do work with Humanism UK. And I'd like, if you would have asked me this question like 3, 4 years ago, it seemed like the trajectory was like positive, right? Like more people were leaving religion, atheism was on the rise. Now we've hit a bit of a stumbling block. I don't know what the hell the situation in America is. I will tell you in Belgium, like it's one of the most atheist countries in Europe. Holland, Iceland are the other two. So here you don't really see an issue. Like if my neighbor is Christian, I wouldn't even know about it. The Muslim community does, and the Hasidic Jewish community does try and do things like, oh, well, we need tax money to do the circumcisions, and we need halal and kosher meat in government and school cafeterias, which we're fighting against because, okay, look, you want to eat your special, lamb that you've slaughtered by knife while hanging it upside down and doing a dance. That you can do that, but government's not going to fund that. But also, it's inhumane. So that's what keeps me kind of fighting. Is I'm all for people having their personal beliefs. The lines you don't cross is first of all onto your children. I think when you have a child, you have to make kind of a decision that whatever beliefs I have in terms of politics, in terms of religion, either I expose them to it when they're 18 years old, but they have to kind of grow up and just be exposed to math and language and colors and just sent to school. And there could be a religious class there that teaches them about this this part of the world believes in this part of the world believes in that. But I think pushing your religion onto a child is a form of child abuse. And I'm not using that term lightly. Like, I think if your child is 3 or 4 years old and you say something to him or her, like to me, if you say God's name in vain, you're going to burn in hell, which is not even, a hyperbole. Like, I'm sure many people have done that today already. I think that is child abuse. Like you're saying to this person, because of something that you said, because of belief you have against mine, you're tormented to burn for all of eternity in devil's hell. This is a 4-year-old kid that you're saying this to. How is that not child abuse? So there should be more stringent laws about that. So yeah, that's why I'm still very much, I don't have kids, but that's why I'm still very much passionate about religion and atheism, is because you can't let your guard down, because the second you do, the hyper religious, whether it's the Islamist or whatever other ones, they will come for the society that you know and love, and try and mold it into their way. But yeah, so for me, the Great Awakening was around 17, 18, and I can't tell you how many books I have them all here, from Harris, Dawkins, Dan Dennett, were all like idols of mine. And that really did shift my thing. Then I tried to start all these atheist societies. Now I'm trying to do as much work as I can with atheism UK. But I think in the UK we're all right. I'm interested to see what's going to happen in America with the rise of the Christo nationalist fascist right, which is scary. Like I do worry for you guys.
Yeah,
But
we
yeah,
have a lot of bad stuff going on for sure.
yeah.
Well, in terms of like your personal experience, though, going back to that regarding existentialism and just the crisis that sometimes we go through, have you ever struggled with the issue of either depression on a significant level, or even just a low level disappointment in life, that there isn't something bigger than just our brief time here? Like I think, for example, I'm going to live and I'm going to die, and when I die, that's it. For a lot of Christians that think through these things, whether they land in atheism or stay Christians, one of the big things that crosses their minds is that they can't stand the idea
But there's
that
nothing else.
there's nothing else, and that this isn't building up to something, it isn't building up to rewards, and that there isn't going to be a judgment of right and wrong and so forth, and that the wrongs won't be made right in the afterlife, and that there won't be some kind of continuation of the story. And it kind of terrorizes them. And I admit, and I've admitted many times in this channel, it terrorizes me still, that I'm not going to go on. I'm very sad that there's no afterlife, because I clung to that for 40 some years. It was my everything to go to heaven and be with God and have that experience, and to realize it's actually much, 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 much shorter. I mean, I had a zillion muches, is much shorter than you ever thought it was going to be. It is a grievous thing for someone that was addicted to that. Being that you never got stuck in it that far, do you feel like there's been any hard parts of this as you think through the fact that you do have an atheistic perspective? Has it been difficult, or do you feel like you've been fine all the way along?
Personally, I find it somewhat liberating, as in like I'm 36 and I know I only have another 20. I've never been scared of death. If I was offered a pill to live forever, I would not want to take it. Are there things that I wish I would have done in life? More decisions I would have made differently? Sure, but that is life. Um, I don't need there to be an afterlife. I'm perfectly I know this might, this isn't how the average person thinks, but for me, when you're dead, you're 6 feet under and the worms are eating you, but it's the end. Does it suck? It sucks when it's, you know what, one of a good quote that my dad told me, he's like, when someone dies, the most heartbreaking thing isn't for the person who died, it's for the people around them. Because the person who's dead is dead, but it's the people around them who have to suffer. So for them, I do feel bad. But
Yeah.
for me, when I die, I won't feel anything. I'll feel the same way that I felt before I was born. But it does make me want to accomplish more on my brief time on this earth. I never thought, because I never believed in an afterlife, I never really thought I would have more time. And I would pose a question to those who do believe in an afterlife. First of all, where's your evidence? And don't tell me the Bible. And second of all, what does that afterlife look like? Is everyone else in that afterlife? Like, are you able to, do people have houses there? Like, it just seems like a concept that people like to throw around. Paradise, afterlife, the second coming, whatever the fuck. Like, give me a more concrete answer of what that is. And then through that, they should realize there's a lot of holes in this theory. Maybe I should make my time here on Earth the most substantial part of living.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, no, it's never really. I mean, obviously, death scares everyone in a similar way. But if I've lived a fulfilling life, if I've left some sort of contribution, that doesn't necessarily mean have to have a family, but although I would like maybe at some point. But write a book or something, or leave some sort of knowledge for the next generation. Yeah.
I mean, it's to be honest, it's great to find someone like yourself who can share that you haven't been infected by this. I mean, it really is crazy that you should be able to do what you're doing, which is just live your life to the fullest and pursue what you find beautiful and most impactful, what you think will leave the planet better than you found it, and all that kind of stuff, without all this grieving. And I think that's one of the most seditious and grotesque parts of Christianity is that when you finally wake up from it and escape the prison of Christianity, you feel so grieved because you were given basically the world. It's like somebody giving you a check for $1 billion, and then you realize it was a bad check. It was always going to bounce. It was like Monopoly money. This was all pretend, and yet you got so convinced this was real. And you never really lost it because you never really had it, but you thought you did. And it really does just such a mind job on people. And it's so cool to think that that's the goal, is to get the next generation that's free of this garbage to think, I have one life and it's beautiful, but I'm not going to spend my life grieving over what I've lost because I didn't really have it. And it's just like a non-issue. It's just like that's a fairy tale. It's like, yeah, there's Valhalla, there's Olympus, whatever. There's all these heaven concepts. They're all mythology, and the mythology of Christianity is just one other one. I didn't grieve that I wasn't going to go to Valhalla as a Christian. It didn't affect
my. Celebrate that you've been freed from the chains of whatever.
Yeah, but when you spend decades thinking that's my future, it does send you into a tailspin that many of us are still struggling with, and I'm one of them. But I know you've talked about the idea of the philosophy of mind with the theories of consciousness, as well as the philosophy of science with structural realism. What got you into that stuff, and how does that help you, experience life in a more fulfilling way as you think through what reality might be that we're actually experiencing?
So, just to rewind a little bit, when I was studying for my bachelor's and my master's degree, it was something totally different. Like, I was supposed to do economics. I went to Oxford to do economics. The dream was go work at Goldman Sachs, become a multi-billionaire banker or a consultant. So that was my thing, economics and mathematics. And then I realized I was not cut for that world, and I was tutoring mathematics, economics. And then I saw a new university open up in London, and they taught philosophy. And for, like, the longest time, I was like, I would love to learn atheism, but there's no such thing as a degree in atheism. The closest thing you can get is a degree in philosophy. I think Hitchens even said, what's alchemy? Is that where they try and make gold? Alchemy?
I think so.
Yeah, he said chemistry is to alchemy as what philosophy is to religion. So basically, like, it's the real thing without the bullshit. Yeah. So I signed up for this university degree. I was already quite old, like 22, 24. Bachelor's in philosophy. Then Richard Dawkins was there, one of my supervisors. Did a master's, and I loved it. And so I signed up for a PhD. And now, yeah, I'm doing it in. I love the areas of philosophy of science, philosophy of consciousness studies. So I do have 2 more books besides these children's books, but these are just my dissertations. So one is called The Simulation Unplugged. It's going to be mirrored, but whatever. Simulation Unplugged. And when you were reading out, you were like, oh, I'm not familiar with this, but I think you actually are. Have you watched the Matrix movie?
Oh, yeah. Too many times.
Yeah, so there's this, Joe Rogan has talked about this, Elon Musk has talked about this. They're like, maybe we're living in a simulation. And that is what's been taking up the last 2 years of my life, and it's going to take up the next 3-4 years of my life. Because I'm the first person in the world to be doing their PhD on the simulation argument. And it's interesting, because my dad was bothering me about it yesterday. He's like, wait a minute, if we're in a simulation, doesn't that mean there's a simulator? And isn't a simulator just the same as a god? And it's actually not like that. And we can do this in another podcast, but it's actually very, very different. It's basically that there's no faith involved. It's all empirical. And do we have empirical scientific reasons for believing that we are in a simulation? And then the structural realism thing is, like, if we are, so like science works, but there's some parts of science that doesn't work. Like, a lot of this quantum stuff is really weird to scientists. Like, they don't fully understand. And I think my current research is indicating, if we are in a simulation, the reason why some of this quantum stuff of, like, the observer effect, like when you look at something, it gets rendered in. Well, what does that remind you of? In video games, when you observe something, it gets rendered in. So, like, those are just the early stages.
I think if it were true what you're saying, I think we could argue that the simulator is very sadistic. Would you agree?
Well, there's been a few papers written on the simulation argument and the problem of evil, right? Because a lot of times people say, well, if there's a God, why did he let the Holocaust happen? Why is he letting, 100,000 children in Gaza? But the thing is, if you've played simulation games, I don't know, did you ever play The Sims or any type of simulation game? Well, you know how it
My
works.
closest I ever came was Minecraft. I played
Minecraft.
Second Life like whatever 20 years ago for a minute, but I've never played The Sims. No.
Okay, but even in Minecraft, but anyways, in some simulation games, it's like you kind of set the initial parameters, yeah, and then you just click play, and then you can walk away from the screen, and like your sim world is just doing things based on the initial parameters.
Right.
So if someone does decide to put the baby in the oven, it's not the simulator's choice. It just is a random variable that has been coded in. And now with this like generative AI stuff, like if you imagine imagine you did have the capacity to run multiple sim worlds, yeah, you have like 100 of them. There's no way you're focused on each 100. You've kind of click play, 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 and then like stuff that happens in each one happens. So you said if there's a simulator, he's sadistic, or if there's a simulator, he's just not bothered. Like he clicked play and then walked away and he's doing his own thing. But the main difference between that and religion, because my dad was saying to me, like, oh, well, it's a God. Well, no, because I'm not making any claims about the simulator. I don't know what he looks like. I don't know what he thinks. I don't know what he says. I don't know whether he's watching us. All I'm saying is if there's empirical evidence for running simulations, then there's a statistical chance, I think, between 1 and 50 that we are in a simulation. But it does address the problem of evil because it kind of makes more sense that like, okay, if there's a God, how did he let all these bad things happen? Why did he let Hitler happen? Well, no, there's a simulator, and yeah, that was a bad guy, but the simulator was, it wasn't looking. He just clicked play, and the video game is kind of, we're all these non-NPCs type of thing.
Sort of a
So it's
deistic perspective, I guess, too.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm. Well, in terms of the what is the doomsday argument? How does that play into this?
Okay, so that's the other. So that was my master's research paper. That was my research master's paper. The doomsday argument basically, um, it basically says our time here on Earth is coming up short, but it just gives a purely statistical argument, and it's one that's difficult to grasp for me still. But basically, the guy who came up with it, Richard Gott, he looked at the timeline of humanity and it depends where you begin humanity, beginning and end. And he said we are finding ourselves quite early in all of humanity. And the example that he gives is like, okay, so he says like, imagine I have like two boxes behind my back. Yeah, one has balls 1 to 10, and the other one has balls 1 to 1,000,000. And I ask you, Tim, left box or right box? And you choose whatever.
Right
Right
box.
box. Yeah. Okay. So I show you, and it's number 7. And then I ask you, do you think it came from the box with just 10 or the box with 100 million? And I don't know what your initial thoughts are, but probably it's two boxes 50-50. But because of the fact that it's 7, it would be really weird if it came from the one from 100 million. It's probably more likely that it came from the one with 10 because it only has 1 through 10. And then there's this whole Bayes theorem for it. But basically, he's saying take that example, which a lot of people don't even agree with that, and say, like, we know we are birth rank 110 billion. I mean, you were born roughly 110 billion humans were before us. So then he asked, if I tell you there's going to be another 110 billion or another whatever 300 trillion, which is more likely? And because of this box analogy, he's basically saying doomsday is more imminent than people would normally. We're not going to go on living for hundreds and hundreds of trillions of years, which yeah.
I
But
think just
there's counter arguments, and it's still an area that's ripe for research. But both
it
of
does
these
help
are
though to remember in that context that we are an evolving animal, And so whether we go on or not, that the fact is that it helps us put ourselves, like, to me, I love the idea of like the further that we can get away from mythology as a worldview, the more we can get ourselves in the right context and say, well, what are you and how did you get here and where are you in the time and space? And to say, well, whether there's a doomsday coming for us, we know that if life were to go on, we're not the pinnacle species. We are an evolution that will not stop. And it helps you kind of be glad and grateful, as it were, for what the fact that we are conscious and that we can love and have, beauty that's not just savage animal, love and so forth. But we can have so many wonderful things. But who knows, to think that, like, I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson talked about, like, if you were to try to explain certain things to even monkeys, and there's just no way they could ever understand some of the things we could talk about. And they would say, but our DNA is almost identical. And yet they can't even fathom what some of the things we could talk about. They said, imagine if you could have a 1% greater increase yet again of the next iteration, us compared to the next level, we wouldn't be able to understand what the next level would be able to try. We would be the monkeys to them. And it's interesting just putting ourselves in the right perspective. It helps you just.
No, I think someone asked him, like, do you think intelligent life will ever visit us? And he said no, because, like you said, we are 99% the same as monkeys, but there's a 1% difference. So they would look at worms. No, they would look at us the way we look at worms. I think that's what deGrasse Tyson said. Like, just because there's that tiny thing. But you're right, like this evolution of a species, which, by the way, half of your country folk do not agree with. Like, how is it that half of Americans do not believe in evolution? And then they will say to you, oh, Tim, it's because it's a theory of evolution. That's such a misnomer. It's not that it's a theory. I have some friends who generally think that dinosaur bones were like laid in to be dug up later.
Like God was intentionally trying to trick people.
Yeah,
to test their faith. It is nuts. And some of that stuff, it's so bizarre. You almost have to just walk away. Like, I'm not even going to debate this. This is so stupid. And honestly, I feel though that way about Christianity in general. People have asked me, do you want to turn your channel into a debate channel? And I'm like, I think I'm going to keep my focus on the people who have woken up and have escaped, because I feel like there's a big point in saying, if you can't look at Christianity and see that it's mythology, I'm sorry, but you're so deep that the arguments won't help you at this point. You are truly almost too far gone. But also, I'd rather focus my energy on the people that have left, knowing that the other people might someday leave, and they'll be like, you know what? I couldn't have seen it all those years. All those years, you could have told me a billion things about evolution or science or comparative mythology. I wasn't ready to hear it. I didn't have ears to hear. But finally, it just something clicked. And that was my experience and many other people's experience. Like, something just clicks. You're like, wait a second, something's wrong here. And it's a splinter in your mind. And you have to figure out what's going on. And all of a sudden, Christianity looks like mythology and bullshit. And it's never looked like that before. But all of a sudden, you can't go back to that. You can't go back, get plugged into the matrix again. You're out, and you're fully out, and you're done. And to me, I feel like my focus is going to be on the people that are like, if we're going to argue that the matrix is the more real world, have at it. Have a good time with it. But my focus is on the real world.
But this whole Christianity is mythology. Have you been following Jordan Peterson? Like, he's trying to take Jordan Peterson.
I haven't seen too much of his stuff, but I know enough to know that I don't think he's got
anti-religion. I would say an atheist, but now he's taking this whole oh, well, Christianity does serve a purpose because it's a mythological stories and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, the archetype stuff.
And he had this debate with Sam Harris, and he asked him what is truth? And for an hour and a half, they debated what is truth, which was so infuriating because Peterson was just avoiding the question. But
yeah, I tend to stay away from people that seem full of themselves, and Jordan Peterson seems very, very, very full of himself. I think I don't like the arrogance that comes with a lot of these speakers. But going back to your story, at this point, though, one of the things that I've loved is that you've gotten involved with this. For a lot of people, they kind of look at the Christian versus atheist argument and the worldview differences, and they just kind of say, you know what, I'm done with that. Like, you've wasted enough of my time. Yeah, I'm an atheist, but I'm going to go live my life now. You've obviously been compelled to get involved in the discussions, in the efforts, and you do it with kindness and grace. And I'm bringing that back to your books as well. Your book is amazing in that very kind, very gentle, simple way to introduce children to critical thinking skills. But like, what prompted you in the first place to get so involved, as opposed to just saying, "I've got one life, I'm going to go live it," and like you said, I'm going to focus on trying to get the the billionaire level, get the yacht, get the 10 vacations a year. Like, what made you
That's
focus on
definitely
this so much?
happening. So I've been involved in the publishing world for about 20 years, but I was more for, I self-published my first book when I was 17, but it was very specific. You studied in the US, so you did like AP or is it AP program or
I'm
um,
not familiar with that term. I got a bachelor's in science at
yeah, but
college.
before that in high school, was it like
They just,
SAT?
yeah, SAT, or yeah, things. There's
Uh,
different variations you can get, but yeah, that's typical.
so I did the IB, which is the International Baccalaureate, which is like not famous at all, but it's grown substantially. It's basically for the last 2 years of high school. Anyways, so I wrote a book about that when I was 17, and I self-published, and then I published now for other people about that. So I knew how to put out a non-fiction book and market it because I knew who to market to. But then, like 20 years down the line, I was like, oh, I really want to write a children's book. And the inspiration for this one, by the way, did you get your kids to read it?
They have, yep, they loved it.
Yeah? Oh,
Yep,
okay,
absolutely.
cool. So,
I will admit though, there's one other book that they love. I don't have it right in front of me, but John Lennon's song "Imagine."
yeah,
There's a book that's been written where it kind of takes the lyrics of his song. My kids love that song, which is obviously
imagine a world with no religion.
encourages my heart so much that they love that. So that's their favorite book, but they did like this very much. Yeah,
But there is a part like imagine no religion
yeah,
in the, do they have a page
exactly.
for
Yeah, that's the part that they love. No
that?
religion, no sky above, no hell below.
Great kids, great kids. So, the inspiration for this, yeah. So I was on Amazon and I looked at top children's books, and it was like number one, uh, first Bible, number one, number two, Quran for kids, and like I'm talking like millions of sales, and like hundreds of thousands of views. I did look around. Are there any atheist children's books? But there's no such thing as an atheist children's book because there shouldn't need to be an atheist children's book. There were things. Are you familiar with the Humanist? It's a series
Yes,
of books. Yeah.
I've got her book.
And
Yeah, great stuff.
David G. McAfee, he publishes. He's probably one of the most like
I know of him. I don't have
a
his
bunch
books
of
yet, but
books. Yeah, I don't know if he's done children's books. Um, yeah, and then there's like humanism for kids. But this book basically, we didn't want to push atheism because we feel like we don't need to, but we wanted kids to think critically. Um, so you're familiar with Anthony Magnabosco
yep.
and the street epistemology movement, which I think is still gaining traction. Like I saw, so that all comes from this book by Peter Boghossian, A Manual for Creating Atheists,
Yep.
which, by the way, I recommend anyone reads. And it's basically like, if you meet someone who's a believer, how can you, in a non-confrontational manner, get them to start questioning their beliefs? And it's by asking these like yes or no questions. Like, oh, you start off by gauging their meter of how confident they are in a claim. So you ask them something like, okay, so you believe that Jesus is our Lord and Savior. Okay, they'll say yes. Okay, how confident are you on a scale of 1 to 100? Oh, 99. And then you go, well, what evidence do you have that Jesus is our Lord and Savior? And they'll hopefully provide some evidence. And then you start asking them questions of like counter examples or like things that would explain. So in our book, it's 30 pages long. I think it took a lot of work. It was 2 years of work. First, we wrote it in Dutch. This is the Dutch version. The thing is called
It's
Giant Teapot.
yeah. There we go. It came out of blurriness.
The thinking was to release it in Holland and Belgium, whoops, because Holland and Belgium are two of the highest atheist rates in Europe. But then we realized like maybe that wasn't the smartest way to go because like everyone here is already convinced and needs to be convinced. But anyways, it was still very well received by the humanist and atheist societies. The production of the book was a long process. The initial thought for me came from, I want to write a children's book. I want to write a children's book that addresses atheism in an indirect manner and incorporates Anthony Magnabosco's street epistemology thing. And I want to use this Russell's teapot analogy. So maybe just for your listeners, Russell's teapot, basically, well, the first time I came across it was in Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. And it's kind of like this. Like if I say, Tim, I believe that there is a teapot orbiting Mars, but you can't see it because you don't have the telescope to look. But I know that it's there. And you say, but Sasha, but what evidence do you have for it? And I say, well, no. I just know that it's there. So the burden of proof, I'm making the claim. So the burden of proof has to come onto me. I'm saying to you that there's a teapot orbiting Mars. You're saying, Sasha, I can't see it with my naked eye. I can't see it with the telescope. I say, no, you have to trust me because, baby, there's a book that tells me that it's orbiting. So we kind of took that Russell's analogy, which basically says whenever you make a claim, the onus on proving the claim is on the person who's making the claim. If you make a claim, it's not my responsibility to disprove you or prove you. No, you need to provide evidence for why whatever claim you're making. And this claim can be, it doesn't have to be religiously related. It can be, you believe in karma or you believe in astrology. Okay, give me evidence. So anyways, we took the teapot and we turned it into a real thing. There's a main character called Tim. And he has a friend, Kate. And on the first few pages, her teddy bear is broken. And then he asks her, okay, let's fix it. What are you going to do about it? And she says, I wanted to use the word pray, but my co-author decided against it. She's like, no, we have to sell more books. So just say ask, don't say pray, because pray might be controversial. So she says, I'm going to ask the teapot. And Tim doesn't know. Tim is basically the inquisitive protagonist of the story. He doesn't know about the teapot. He doesn't know anything about teapotism. He's like, what? What do you mean ask? So she says, oh, my mom believes in a teapot in the sky, aka God. I'm going to ask it to fix the teddy bear. And Tim goes, what? I've never heard of this. And she goes, let's go find the teapot. So they go on this adventure and they encounter a few characters. And this is important because a big theme of the book is community and like engaging with the community to help solve your problems. So they meet first an old lady on the bench who doesn't believe in a teapot, but she believes in plates. And then they meet these two farmers who don't believe in anything. They're supposed to be atheists. And also they're very friendly. So they might be, we leave it up to the reader to decide whether they are homosexual or not, but we are very open to that interpretation. And they meet them, they go on to the top floor of a high rise. And Kate goes, look, the teapot. And she really sees the clouds in the formation of a teapot. And as she closes her eyes to pray, spoiler alert for anyone who wants to read the book, Tim realizes, oh shit, this is just clouds. So they dissipate. And when she opens her eyes, the clouds have been dissipated. And not to disappoint her, he doesn't go like, ha, you were wrong. Your God is false. No, he goes, listen, you want to fix your teddy bear? I have an idea. So they go back and they go to the farmers and they ask for wool. They go to the old lady, they ask for knitting tools. They go to the lady in the office, they ask for a paperclip. And the last scene, the most beautiful scene, is the two of them together, fixing the teddy bear by hand, sustainability. And he asks her right before, so you were confident in the teapot. How much? She said 90%. After that, she said 50%. So he's not saying to her, you're wrong, you're delusional, but he made her at least readjust her belief parameters, which is the best you can hope for, to be honest.
I love it. And beautiful illustrations. I'm just gonna
so the illustrations. We had the idea for the book back in 2018. Then in 2020, the Russian invasion happened, and I have Russian heritage. So we put out a thing on this like freelancer. Yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes. Yeah. So our illustrator is, I'm mirrored, so maybe you have to show the name of our illustrator, Anastasia Zababashkina at the bottom there. Yeah, she's cool. She's from Ukraine, so she had to flee, obviously, once the invasion broke out. But she did this and she's still active. So if you guys are looking for an illustrator, she's really, really good.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's got loads of little Easter eggs in it as well. But we never really talk about religion. Like, okay, there's this one scene.
What page is that?
Uh, like 3 or 4 where they're praying on the side. Or maybe it works for me. No. Yeah, that one. Yeah. Yeah, perfect. So he asks, the teapot, what is that? And she says, the teapot helps me and my family sometimes. Kate explained why her family believes in the teapot and how whatever they asked for is exactly what they got. And this is like kind of them praying, which kind of alludes to like, okay, she came from a family that believes in that. Um, the funny thing is that at the end of the day, someone can say, well, hold on. So she did ask the teapot, and the bear was fixed. So you could say maybe it was the powers of the teapot that fixed it. So we do leave it open-ended. Anyways, I've given this book to Richard Dawkins, to Sam Harris, to Mariam Namazi, Stephen Fry, I saw in London, and they've all loved it. So the feedback from the atheist bigwigs has been great. Anthony Magnabosco also wrote us a great review. Um, the problem is it's quite expensive because we self-publish, so it's like $20 on Amazon, which is why I will say to your followers, listeners, if anyone wants, just can you leave my email in the bio description here? I
Sure.
will gladly send a full PDF of the book because I'm a big believer in like try before you buy. So yeah, if you want to read the full story, I'll send you the ebook for free. But also, if there's anyone listening who has links to a publishing company, we want to release this. The reason it costs so much, I mean, you have it in your hands. It's full cover, it's 30 pages. Like it's a really beautiful book. The illustrations are really beautiful.
Yeah.
But just to make it cost about $13. Then Amazon takes another $6. So basically, it's a project between the four of us. For every book we sell, we have like $1 profit. Then we have to, but
That's
it was
crazy.
never about like it was never about making money. I
Right.
just had an idea. My friends believed in our idea,
Mm.
and I
I
really
love
do
it.
think that there's not another book like it. And like every like the people who are atheist inclined and buy it for their kids, they see like way more value. Like they see all the little Easter eggs and they see all that cool stuff. So what I don't want it to be is like one of those, cult classics that are like lost in history, but then later on rediscovered. No, like I would love for this to be in bookstores, but the only way for that to happen is to get like a bigger publisher, you know. And yeah, I do want to approach because there are some like Armin Navabi. He
Think so.
he yeah, he publishes that. Yeah, he wrote a book like The Atheist Muslim. He has his own printing thing. And I did get in touch with David G. McAfee, but his publisher said because I already published hardcover, it's hard for. But basically, the dream would be I'm more than happy if a publisher comes along, like, look, I want to get this in bookstores. I think it's good enough to be in bookstores, but it's too expensive. Let's make it smaller, make it paperback, and let's get it out there.
Yeah. Well, I love it. It's awesome, awesome stuff, and great messaging. And it's basically like you said, it's an easy read. It's not like it's shoving things down your throat. It's just basically saying, let's look at the evidence, and if
Yeah.
the evidence isn't there, then let's admit that we're not ready to draw conclusions until we have better ways of thinking about this or analyzing it. And it's cute too because it's the kids thinking through it, but also kids just focused on the experience of trying to fix the teddy bear, which is awesome.
Yeah, yeah. Like most of the times when kids read it, well, like the ones who are under the age of 4, they just love the illustrations. Then the ones who are like 4 or 5, as you said, they're just like, oh, we want to fix it, we want to fix it. And the ones who are older, like 7, 8, they're like, wait a minute, there's like some deeper meaning going on here.
Yeah, yeah. The teapot is the god character. I love to often ask people, sort of one of the parting questions I ask is, when you're going through deconversion, you're thinking through the issues, you're thinking through the atrocities of the Old Testament, or you're looking at comparative mythology, you're just getting better educated, you're reading through Bart Ehrman's books and so forth, you're learning more and more about where this religion came from and how it evolved and so forth. You're thinking through things like patriarchy, misogyny, and all the different, control structures in religion. For a lot of people that are stuck in it and really were hardcore Christians, which I know you weren't, there's a really hard journey that they go through at a certain point where, like, if I move forward, my family might not talk to me or respect me anymore and all that stuff. There's a lot to lose. I can't really ask you that question because that wasn't your journey, right?
No.
But
But I can sympathize with that. Go on. Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess my question will be, add any thoughts you have about sympathizing with that, but also for anyone that is maybe trying to get more grounded than ever in their new identity, and in some ways, perhaps their new identity is going to reflect some of the places that you've already been for a while. What would you say to someone that's just trying to get their footing in the new life, post mythology? What are some of the things that have helped you the most to get grounded and healthy and healed?
I mean, it really does depend on how much in that person's personal circumstances they're losing from being disowned from the community. First thing I would do is look up, I don't know what country we're talking about, but whether in America or in the UK or in Belgium, look up organizations such as Freedom from Faith, or there's ones that are, because I know you're talking about the American perspective, but in the UK, it's usually Islam. Like there, if you leave, there's no support system for them. Like if they say, I don't want to wear a hijab, you're out. You're disowned by the community.
Yeah.
But there are organizations who are focused on supporting you, at least in terms of like at least putting a roof over your head and getting you some sort of financial support to survive for foreseeable future. But it is huge. Like if I'm just thinking of an example, like if you're from, the Red Bible Belt America, and you stumble upon one of your videos and you decide, Daddy, I'm not a Christian. What's going to happen? Daddy's going to say, either you say you are a Christian or you get the fuck out of my house. What if he's 12, 13 years old? What's he going to do? So there must be, I don't know, you're better off, yeah. I don't know what it's like in America, but there
Well, the
must be
group,
social services
the one group I
to,
was going to mention that's probably parallel to what you were saying in the UK is Daryl Ray's group, Recovering from Religion, RFR.
yes,
They're good. Now I don't think that they're
yes.
available to help like with housing, but they're there for counseling and it is 24 hours. So you could sign up and say I want to call 2 a.m. or something. You can set up a
That's a
time
great
and
group,
they're great for that. I've called them
yeah.
myself when I first deconverted.
Yeah. So definitely something. And to be honest, I wish there were more groups like that. So if
Yeah.
anyone's watching and thinking of donating to a charity or something, um, they really do need our help because there's
But I guess what I meant with my question was more philosophically. What are some of the philosophical, epistemological, existential things that have helped you, whether it's just topics you've thought through or resources you've been to, or even philosophers you've read, whether from ancient Greece or from current day? What are some of the things that have helped you just to say, I want, like Matt Dillahunty says, I want to have as many true things as possible and as few false things as possible in my mind. What are some of the things that have helped you to get to that point more and more?
So while I was studying philosophy, like one of my philosophy teachers, he told me you should never idolize any philosopher. Because I was like, oh, Schopenhauer, and then I read a bit of him. I was like, yeah, I love it. And then Nietzsche, oh, I love it. My philosophy teacher told me like, no, like don't do that. Just read the good points. But one thing I will say has helped me a lot in the last few years is this stoicism, being a stoic, like like where if you can't impact it, then don't let it kind of change your emotions toward it. Only be emotionally inclined to the things that you can impact on. This whole stoicism movement. So I would say maybe look into that. Yeah.
I love it. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, I appreciate you sharing your story today. Was there anything in your story or your what's on your mind that we didn't get to that you wanted to add today?
No, the only thing I will say is if you don't mind leaving my email at the bottom of the bio, if anyone wants to get a free PDF copy of this or of any of my books, I'm more than happy to send. And yeah, or any questions, they can also email me. And I just want to say thank you, Tim, for having me on. I really, really enjoyed this. I was a
Absolutely.
little nervous, but I enjoy these podcast things.
Yeah, I appreciate you doing it. And
You want
so
to bring me back one day to talk about the doomsday argument and proper, we can do that as well.
yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, I will have a whole bunch of links. I'll have the links for of course, the Atheism UK we just talked about, but
Yeah.
also the links for to get your book on Amazon and your email address and all
Yeah,
the
I'll
other
send you
things. I
the
see you're on
Instagram
Instagram as well. But yeah, I'll definitely have the link. So everyone, please go like and subscribe and check out the great work. But it's so cool to see what you're doing. And honestly, I'll just tack this one real quick here at the end. You're kind of walking in footsteps that I want to walk someday myself. I want to create a kid's book as well. The one that I want to create is the nuance would be that it would be less focused on epistemology and it will be more comparative mythology, such as it would explain what Dionysius was like and how the writers of the Gospels copied from Dionysius and were influenced by the discussions in the era of this is what demigods do. And so you see it in Dionysius, you see it in all these other gods, and to weave it in to a point where, but it would have to be, in my mind, very substantial, where we're talking about the huge ways that Homer's Odyssey was woven into the Gospels, the ways that Neoplatonism was woven in, the ways that Pythagoreanism was woven in, which is really cool. All this stuff, the numerology, but it would on a kid's level, where not perhaps like little kid, but on a level where maybe 5, 6, 7-year-old or more could get it, but something to the point where it's directed at children. But when adults pick it up, adults that are deconverting or deconverted, they're going to be like, holy shit, this would have helped me so much if I had this as a kid.
Really?
Like,
Okay,
and
yeah,
almost
dude,
like they're learning stuff. Like, I didn't know that about Dionysius. What's that? How did that happen? And like, why did I not know about that? And it's like, if you would have read that first and then the Gospels, you would have been like, there's no way that Jesus was real. There's no way he wasn't a copy of the motif based on that information, but you just don't know. And that was one of the biggest parts of my deconversion, was just that frustration of like, I was a Christian for 40 years. I went to Bible college to be a pastor. Why didn't any of you all tell me the bare bones basics of where this mythology came from? You didn't tell me it came from anywhere. You said it just was real life, real history that got written down as God inspired the authors. You said this was just a divine book, but it represented reality from Jesus's real life. You didn't tell me it's a rewrite of all these other stories. And
am I right in thinking that the Bible is a copy of the Old Testament and the Quran is a plagiarism of the Bible? Like it's all the same story told.
Yeah, it's a lot of, I mean, in that sense too, I would just say that it's probably pretty clever in the sense, a lot of us are like, oh, it's just the goat herder's guide to the galaxy. These are all stupid idiots writing this stuff, but it's not. I mean, because if you were to write the Gospels, you would have had to, because they're rewriting a bunch of the Old Testament stories, you would have had to know the Old Testament like the back of your hand, but they're weaving in a lot of the Greco-Roman mystery cult mythology. You would have had to know all that. A lot of Neoplatonism.
How do you know about all this like Greco-Roman stuff?
That was my journey out. Like all the reasons that a lot of people would leave, say, oh, I didn't like the fact that God committed genocide and this and that. Those were red flags to me, but none of them would deconvert me, and part of that was because I was a strong Calvinist, and Calvinism has some mental gymnastics that keep you very stuck in your worldview, even when you see the atrocities.
I don't know anything about Calvinism, to be honest.
Calvinism just says that you don't come to God and say, God, I want to believe in you, until he has actually chosen you first, and he chose you before time began. Calvinism says that God said, I see all of humanity, and I'm going to pick you and you and you and you, and you're all actually
a subset of Christianity, Calvinism.
Yeah, it's a subset of Christianity that says it's basically the idea that just like God chose ancient Israel, he says of all the tribes out there, I'm going to pick specific tribes, and even within that, like he says, I'm going to pick Jacob, but not Esau. I'm going to pick specific people to be my chosen people. Christianity that's Calvinistic. Very fair. Yeah, Christianity Calvinistic is that on steroids. It says that God is not only specifically picking nations, but he's actually picking individuals. And they would argue that God brings glory to himself through both the ones he picks as well as the ones he doesn't. The ones he doesn't pick, he brings glory by torturing them and that torture shows how much he hates sin and how holy he is. And therefore, he has the right to commit genocide and land theft and slavery and child brides. He's doing this stuff to prove that when you do it the wrong way, he will get you. He's the ultimate mob boss. And
It doesn't sound very quick,
very Christian. Well, but believe me, though,
Christian.
Calvinism is woven into a lot of Christian nationalism. There's a lot of stuff that's like the guy that just took over the Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth. Like he's from some of these ultra Calvinistic groups.
Oh,
Christian nationalism and Calvinism are very, because the idea is that that God is basically the ultimate king on the throne, and what they have woven into Calvinism is frequently what's called postmillennialism. Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah.
It basically, for anyone that doesn't know, it's basically saying Jesus is not coming back until the entire planet bows its knee in a theocratic government sense to the Lord. Therefore, we need to push as hard as we can geopolitically, culturally, to make this world a Christian nation and a Christian world. And so Calvinism is woven into that a lot. There's a lot of Calvinistic stuff going on with the Christian nationalism, but all that stuff keeps people stuck in this because you can see genocide and think they deserved it. God had to do it. God had to punish sin.
Some way to justify it, yeah.
But what got me out was learning that the gospel stories are based heavily on earlier stories in the Greco-Roman mystery cults and the rewrites of the Old Testament, and even in Homer's Odyssey. And that's some of the craziest stuff. When you look at Homer's Odyssey and the work of the great Dennis MacDonald, you see that they actually took not just motifs, but literal word-for-word quotes from Homer's Odyssey and wove it into the New Testament and the Gospels.
May I ask, who's the one that introduced you to those texts? Like, how did you encounter those texts that you saw, whoa, this is an exact replica?
I would say at that point, my journey took me all over the place, but there are some YouTube channels right now that are kind of making it simple. I would say for anybody that doesn't know what I'm talking about, a channel like Myth Vision. Do you know Myth Vision with Derek Lambert?
I've heard it.
Myth Vision with Derek Lambert is probably the pinnacle one. There are others that are similar. There's others that, even people he works with. Dragons in Genesis is a smaller channel, but that one is great. Just Jason Folks is doing great work. A lot of other work. History Valley with Jacob Berman. There are scholars who are talking about where the mythology came from.
Looking at Myth Vision right now.
When you look at it, I mean,
he's got loads of great guests.
Yeah, Derek's channel's exploded. But my journey was not through that channel, and at that point he was a much smaller channel, but it was basically the same kind of track. And it's basically saying you got to look at all these different things, and eventually you get to a point where you say they did not record history. They looked at other existing mythologies and adapted it, plagiarized, copied. It was the motif. It was in the air. Some of it was just that they were all saying about their gods. Some of it was specifics, like we want to copy that specific idea about that demigod and copy it over. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you end up getting a lot of these little red flags. You're like, okay, so like when you see the word Zacchaeus, the little man that climbed the tree, or you see the word Emmaus, the disciples on the road to Emmaus suddenly realized Jesus was the suffering servant because of his wounds. You start, and the Aquarius, the upper room, the man with the upper room who has the water pitcher. There's all these little tip-offs that you begin to see, and it also expands to Pythagoreanism with the numerology. In John 21, there's exactly 153 fish caught in the net. Like, holy shit, this is Pythagoreanism. And you eventually get to a point where you know that there's a lot more that you need to study and understand, but you know enough to say, there's no way this is real. There's no way this isn't a copy of a copy of a copy. Plus, you weave in just, canonicity. You're like, but there were dozens of other books that they rejected. Why did they reject those and these were in? And did they edit them and copy them?
Do you remember like the one day where you had your epiphany? Was it like overnight?
It was. It was at the end of September of 2019. And it was my kids were eating breakfast. I was sitting at this computer, and it literally just hit me. And it was within that hour, it was like someone just instantly said,
awesome.
We're like, all the stuff you've been learning, we're going to deal with the therefore of it all. We're going to say, you've been learning stuff for 3 years now. What does this mean? What is the conclusion? And I basically said to myself,
Did you make a video? Did you make a video of that?
I did. Yeah, I'll share with you. I'll link it as well beneath this video. But basically, it was my way of saying, it was my saying to myself, Tim, admit it. This is not real. And
Awesome.
I finally said, I was like, this is not real. And once I did, like it was that hour, I was fully deconverted. And at that point, my life completely changed, and I had more peace than I had in 43 years as a Christian. I had more peace in the first hour in the first
Must
day.
have been scary though for the first day or so, but it must have been fucking real, yeah.
Well,
Like
just
a
the
weight
relief.
lifted off the shoulder.
Well, to me, it was the relief that I had time left in my life to live my real life.
Yeah.
That was what got me. It was like, you could have had this revelation when you were 85 years old and thought, oh shit, I've got
Right.
6 months left
That's
to
the
live.
way you should think about it. Not like, oh, I wish I would have had this when I was 22. No, you should be happy that you're not having it when you're fucking something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And plus the fact that I could,
sooner than later.
plus I could immediately think, I've got little kids here. I can change the trajectory of how they are or are not indoctrinated. Those two things combined, I felt like I won the lottery.
No, honestly, I think so. That's a great way of thinking about it, man. Honestly, yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I do look forward to the doomsday argument on our next one, but I look forward very much. I'm going to be connecting with other people with Atheism UK, but thank you so much for sharing your story and insights today.
This is my first real official broadcast, whatever. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome to the club.
And I wish the best for you. And yeah, hopefully speak to you soon again.
Thank you so much. Well, I'll just wrap up by saying we've been speaking with Sasha Zouev. Sasha, thank you so much. Great to get to know you. Look forward to the next time. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Take care.
You too.